Welcome to today's deep dive. We are just thrilled to have you joining the conversation today because honestly, the journey we're about to take you on it is going to stick with you for a very long time.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of those that just gets under your skin.
Exactly. So today, we are looking at a baffling 1974 cold case, one that went completely dark for decades. I mean, it took over 25 years to finally solve.
A massive amount of time.
Right. And our source material for this deep dive is this incredibly meticulous true crime account. It's drawn from a YouTube video transcript by the creator, Mr. Ballin.
Which is such a great source for this because of how detailed it is.
It really is. So our mission today is to kind of guide you through the bizarre twists, the just devastating red herrings, and the really tragic ironies surrounding the murder of a 22-year-old college student. Her name was Barbara Rockey.
Yeah.
And we're going to look really closely at how the severe limitations of 1970s forensics just collided with a brutal killer who was honestly hiding right in plain sight. Okay, let's unpack this.
It is a profound story to unpack. And, as we work through the timeline of what actually happened to Barbara, I really want you to keep the psychological core of this narrative in mind, because this is fundamentally a story about how deep isolation and just this desperate desire to belong somewhere can make someone tragically vulnerable.
So vulnerable. And, to understand the depths of that isolation, you really have to picture this setting.
Right. The environment is key here.
Completely. So the year is 1974. We are at Brigham Young University, BYU, in Provo, Utah.
A very specific cultural landscape.
Very specific. It's a highly religious, very strict environment with rigid behavioral codes. And enter Barbara Rockey.
Right.
She's a 22-year-old junior, originally from California. She is a total free spirit, and notably, she is not a practicing Mormon.
Which immediately sets her apart.
Exactly. She only came to BYU because she was just fascinated by the idea of a faith-based lifestyle. She thought it would be, a unique experience.
The cultural exploration.
Yeah, exactly. But almost immediately upon arriving, she feels deeply, fundamentally alienated from the entire student body.
Which makes total sense when you look at the cultural friction of that era. I mean, her classmates are attending church for hours every week, and they're strictly adhering to very specific behavioral values.
Right.
But Barbara, she wants to explore new ideas. She wants to study different philosophies, and she wants to date.
Yeah, she wants the typical college experience.
Right. So by January of 1974, she moves into a new living situation off campus. She's hoping a change of scenery will improve her social life.
Makes sense.
But she moves in with 7 other women, and unfortunately, these roommates are just as devout as the rest of the campus. They judge her intensely for her lifestyle choices.
7 roommates judging you constantly? That sounds like a nightmare.
It was.
And faced with that judgment, Barbara doesn't back down. She doesn't try to fit the mold at all.
No, she does the exact opposite.
She really does.
Yeah.
She decides to lean hard into the weirdness.
Yeah.
She starts deliberately shocking these 7 roommates.
Oh.
She tells them things like she prays to the devil, just to see their reaction.
Which is such a California rebel thing to do in that environment.
Totally. But the provocation works a little too well. The roommates go from merely judging her to being genuinely terrified of her presence in the house.
Which just backfires on her completely.
It really does. That dynamic isolates Barbara even further. She has no sanctuary at home and no community on campus, except she does have one anchor.
Her best friend.
Yeah, her best friend, a guy named Jerry Hicker.
And Jerry is a crucial figure in Barbara's world. To understand why she leaned so heavily on him, we really have to analyze the profound loneliness and fear she was experiencing at that exact time. Because you have to realize that 1974 was notoriously known across college campuses as the Year of Fear.
The Year of Fear, yeah.
There were these high-profile, just terrifying attacks on young women happening all over the West Coast. Just a couple of months prior, a student in neighboring Washington State was brutally beaten in her dorm room.
In her own room.
Right. And another had vanished without a trace. And Barbara looked very similar to those victims. She had the long, dark hair, similar facial features.
So she was definitely an archetype.
Exactly. She was acutely aware of the danger lurking in the world. So Jerry represented a safe harbor. He was the nice guy, best friend, who listened to her vent about her roommates and validated all her fears.
And she wasn't just venting, right? She was taking active physical steps to protect herself from that outside danger.
Right, she was proactive.
Yeah, she was taking judo classes on campus just to learn how to physically defend herself. And she even had Jerry help her buy a handgun for protection.
A very serious handgun.
Very serious. They specifically picked out a .357 Magnum. Now, for those who don't know the firearms, a .357 is a very heavy, powerful, incredibly loud weapon.
It has major stopping power.
Exactly. It is not something you just easily misplace.
Which brings us to a vital clue that surfaces before the main tragedy even begins. A few weeks prior to the events of March 11th, Barbara's heavy .357 revolver goes completely missing.
It's gone.
Gone. She reports the theft to campus police, and she notes that a weapon of that size doesn't just slip between the couch cushions. Someone took it.
Obviously.
But the investigation stalls, and the gun remains missing.
And that missing gun just lingers in the background as we arrive at Barbara's breaking point. So on the morning of March 11th, 1974, Barbara sits at her desk and furiously writes a goodbye letter to her 7 roommates.
It's just done.
She is done. She writes that she is leaving campus for good to go find her people.
Her people.
Yeah. So let's walk through the timeline of that final morning. At 10 a.m., Jerry drops off her car at her house. He had borrowed it for a ski trip.
Normal friend stuff.
Exactly. Barbara then heads to her social work class. She sits there alone, completely ignoring the whispers of the other students behind her.
The isolation is just palpable there.
It is. After class, she doesn't meet up with Jerry like they had tentatively planned. Instead, she gets in her car and drives an hour north toward Salt Lake City.
A pretty long drive.
Yeah, and her goal is to visit a pawn shop and sell her prized turquoise necklace. She needs to secure some seed money so she can finally leave town.
And from that exact point, Barbara vanishes.
Just gone.
Jerry goes over to her house later that afternoon because she blew off their plans, which was highly uncharacteristic behavior for her.
Right, she was usually very reliable with him.
Exactly. But her car isn't in the driveway. So he walks back toward his own place, but on the way, he spots her car parked randomly outside an unknown apartment complex down the street.
Just left there.
Just left there. The doors are unlocked. He looks inside and finds that vague goodbye note she had written to her roommates sitting on the seat.
The one about finding her people.
Right. And Jerry immediately interprets it as a suicide note. He takes the letter to her roommates, and together they all march down to the campus police to file a missing person report.
And the campus police, they take the report, but as is often the case with adults who leave vague notes, they tell the group they just have to wait to see if she turns up.
Standard 1970s police procedure.
Yeah, unfortunately. But the very next day, the scene shifts 50 miles north to Big Cottonwood Canyon. Now, this is a hilly, remote nature preserve on the outskirts of Salt Lake City.
Very rugged terrain.
Extremely rugged.
Yeah.
A utility worker is hiking up this very steep trail to check on some water lines. He reaches the top of this remote ridge and finds a naked woman lying face down in the dirt.
Just a horrific discovery.
It is. And at first, his brain struggles to even process the scene. He absurdly thinks she must be sunbathing.
In the freezing Utah weather.
In March.
Yeah.
But when reality finally sets in, he realizes she is dead.
Yeah.
He runs back down the mountain to call the authorities.
And this is when Captain Pete Hayward from the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office arrives to take over the scene.
Right.
He is a seasoned investigator, and the crime scene he walks into is jarring. He notes immediately that the victim has multiple bullet wounds in her back.
Right in the back.
Yeah, later confirmed by the medical examiner to be 5 shots from a .357 caliber weapon. And because the victim is found completely naked in an isolated area, investigators preemptively collect a rape kit. In 1974, this was a standard precaution to preserve potential evidence, even if obvious signs of a physical struggle weren't immediately apparent.
And that lack of a struggle is really the most haunting part of the scene to me. There are no marks in the dirt, no broken branches indicating she was dragged up this massive hill.
Nothing.
Nothing. And right next to her body, her clothes and shoes are folded neatly into a stack.
Yeah.
I mean, how does a 1974 detective process a scene like that without modern forensics?
Well, what's fascinating here is Hayward's immediate psychological deduction. This trail was steep, it was grueling and long.
Yeah, not a casual walk.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Forcing someone up that incline against their will would be nearly impossible without leaving massive physical evidence of a struggle in the brush.
Makes sense.
So Hayward deduces that the victim walked up this trail willingly, meaning she was with someone she deeply trusted.
Wow.
As for the neatly folded clothes, that suggests psychological compliance under extreme duress.
Because she's terrified.
Exactly. She was likely forced to undress at gunpoint. Folding her clothes was a desperate delaying tactic.
Just trying to buy seconds.
Yes, it is a known psychological response. It's a way to comply, to stall for time, and plead for your life, rather than engaging in a frantic physical struggle against an armed assailant that you know you cannot win.
It is just chilling to picture her doing that, folding her clothes like that.
It really is.
So Hayward needs to figure out who she is. On a whim, he orders his deputies to scoop up and bag the dirt from underneath the victim's body.
A very smart move.
Incredibly smart. He is hoping to find microscopic clothing fibers or maybe a stray hair because DNA testing simply does not exist yet.
Right, it's 1974.
Exactly. Eventually, through local news broadcasts, BYU students identify the body. It is Barbara Rockey. Hayward now has a murder investigation on his hands, and he starts looking at a roster of seemingly perfect suspects.
Naturally, Hayward's first instinct is to look closely at her off-campus living situation.
The roommates.
The roommates. Given the domestic tension, the intense religious differences, and the fact that Barbara was actively trying to terrify them with talk of the devil, those 7 women are prime suspects.
So if her roommates are the obvious starting point, where does an investigator even go when they are cleared?
Good question.
Because Hayward interviews them. And despite the fact that they openly admit their distaste for Barbara, they all have rock-solid, verified alibis for the time of the murder.
They couldn't have done it.
Right. They're officially off the table.
That is when Hayward gets a massive breakthrough through just old-fashioned police work. He remembers the pawn shop detail gathered from Barbara's friends.
The turquoise necklace.
Right. He canvasses the pawn shops in Salt Lake City and actually locates the prized turquoise necklace.
Wow.
And the clerk confirms that a young woman matching Barbara's description sold it at 12:50 p.m. on the exact day she vanished.
Such a precise timeline.
It is. But the clerk adds a detail that pivots the entire investigation. Barbara told the clerk she was in a massive rush because her boyfriend was circling the block outside in the car.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. In all the interviews with friends and family, no one had ever mentioned a boyfriend.
Nobody.
But when deputies press Barbara's social circle about a secret romance, they uncover a name, Richard Finder.
Richard Finder.
Yes. And Richard is not a college student. He is an older, self-proclaimed psychic living in California.
A psychic.
Yes. Barbara had bonded with him after calling into a radio show where he was doing readings. They developed this intense spiritual connection over the phone.
And this is where the timeline gets genuinely bizarre.
Yeah.
Richard Finder calls the Salt Lake City police completely out of the blue.
From California.
Well, wait. He tells the dispatcher he had a psychic vision that the murder weapon in this specific case was thrown into a body of water.
Okay.
Keep in mind, the police had never publicly released the detail that the murder weapon was missing from the scene.
That's holdback evidence.
Exactly. Only the killer or someone intimately involved should know that.
Wait, how does a psychic from California end up in the crosshairs of a Utah murder investigation? I mean, a vision isn't enough to bring him in.
Because Hayward discovers Richard is actually in Salt Lake City on a ski trip at the exact time of the murder.
You are kidding.
No, he is staying very close to Big Cottonwood Canyon.
Wow.
Hayward immediately brings him in for an interrogation. The circumstantial evidence is staggering. When pressed for an alibi for March 11th, Richard's story falls completely apart. His friends confirm he was unaccounted for during large chunks of the day.
Oh, man.
And the most damning piece of evidence, Richard legally owns a .357 caliber handgun.
The exact type of powerful weapon used to kill Barbara.
The exact weapon.
Hayward has to be certain he has his guy. A psychic boyfriend who inserted himself into the investigation to play games with the police.
I look so obvious.
Right. He seizes Richard's gun and sends it to the ballistics lab, fully expecting to close the case. But then, the crushing blow arrives. The ballistics report comes back, and it proves definitively that Richard's gun is not the murder weapon.
Not a match.
Not a match at all. The grooves do not match the bullets pulled from the scene.
It's a devastating letdown for the 1974 investigative team. I mean, despite all the eerie coincidences, the failed alibis, and the proximity to the canyon, Richard is cleared.
Just a crazy coincidence.
Like a completely wild coincidence. The case goes cold. But during those cold years, the police didn't just give up. They explored massive, terrifying theories that really define the era.
Yeah.
Which raises an important question about the context of the 1970s. If you were investigating the murder of a young woman in Utah in 1974, you eventually have to look at serial killers. And investigators looked very hard at Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy is the ultimate boogeyman of this era. I mean, he was arrested just an hour away from where Barbara lived in 1975, merely a year after her murder.
Right, in that same area.
Exactly. He was actively hunting and killing college-aged girls in Utah.
He was a terrifyingly viable suspect. Barbara fit his victim profile perfectly. A young, attractive college student with long, dark hair navigating public spaces alone.
The textbook Bundy victim.
Exactly. But when investigators painstakingly scrubbed Bundy's timeline against Barbara's murder, they found an ironclad alibi.
Really?
Yes. Bundy was officially ruled out because records proved he was actively committing a different murder in Washington state at the exact time Barbara was killed in Utah.
Wow.
So as the 70s turned into the 80s and then the 90s, the Barbara Rocky case just sat in a cardboard box, completely unsolved.
Until we fast forward all the way to 2005, over 30 years have passed. Enter Detective Todd Park.
A new set of eyes.
Exactly. He is a brand new homicide detective, and he receives an emotional phone call from Barbara's sister, who practically begs him to reopen the case.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. Park agrees, fired up with the enthusiasm of a new detective.
Yeah.
He pulls the 1974 evidence boxes, knowing he has one massive advantage that Captain Hayward couldn't even dream of: modern DNA testing.
But the reality of testing 3-decade-old evidence is brutal.
It rarely works out cleanly.
No, it doesn't. Detective Park sends the preemptive rape kit and Barbara's folded clothing to the modern crime lab. The results come back negative.
Nothing.
Nothing. The biological material from those primary items is either non-existent or far too degraded by time and poor preservation to yield any usable DNA profile.
So 2 years go by. It is now October 2007. Detective Park is anxious and frustrated. He has sent almost every piece of physical evidence to the lab and got nothing but dead ends.
Running out of options.
He has exactly one item left in the evidence locker. Remember that dirt that Captain Hayward told his deputies to scoop up from underneath Barbara's body?
The dirt.
Yes. Park sends that dirt to the lab. He honestly doesn't expect it to yield anything. It's a Hail Mary pass. But then the phone rings. It's the lab.
They found something.
They achieved a scientific marvel. They found a trace DNA profile preserved safely inside that soil. Park immediately runs that trace profile through the National Criminal Database, waiting for a hit.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is staggering.
It really is.
The entire evolution of modern forensic science relies heavily on the meticulous habits of the past. Captain Hayward in 1974 had no concept of DNA.
Not at all.
He collected that dirt solely looking for microscopic fibers or hair, but he preserved it properly, logged it meticulously, and stored it safely.
Incredible foresight.
More than 3 decades later, that single instinct is exactly what solved the murder.
It gives you chills to think about. So Park runs the profile and gets a definitive match. The name that comes back from the database is Jerry Hicker.
Her best friend.
Her rock, her absolute best friend, the guy who dropped off her car, the guy who helped her buy the gun, the guy who organized the roommates to report her missing.
Just a complete betrayal.
How do investigators even begin to fit those pieces together after 30 years?
By using the DNA evidence to secure the identity, police were finally able to reconstruct exactly what happened on March 11, 1974, and it exposed the psychology of a violently possessive friend.
Let's walk through that tragic reconstruction.
Right. Jerry gets into Barbara's car with her that morning. They drive to the pawn shop in Salt Lake City together. Jerry waits in the car while she goes inside to sell the turquoise necklace.
So he is the mysterious boyfriend she told the clerk was circling the block.
Exactly. When she returns with the cash, Jerry starts laying on the guilt. He knows she is leaving town forever, escaping his orbit. He guilt trips her into taking one last beautiful hike up in Big Cottonwood Canyon before she goes.
And because she trusts him implicitly, she agrees.
She agrees.
They hike up that grueling, steep trail, and this perfectly explains Captain Hayward's deduction at the scene. She walked up willingly because she was with her safe harbor.
Her protector.
Right. But once they reach the top, completely isolated from the world, Jerry's demeanor shifts. He makes a sudden romantic advance. Barbara recoils. She rejects him, making it clear she views him only as a friend.
And that rejection just shatters his ego. The nice guy persona drops, replaced by furious humiliation. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a weapon.
Not just any weapon.
No, it is Barbara's own .357 Magnum, the heavy gun that had mysteriously gone missing weeks earlier. Jerry had stolen it from her. He aims her own weapon at her and forces her to undress.
This is where that haunting detail of the folded clothes comes back. Barbara is horrified. She's trying desperately to de-escalate the situation with the man she thought was her protector.
Just pleading.
She painstakingly folds each piece of their clothing, stacking them neatly on the dirt, begging her best friend for her life. She's doing everything in her psychological power to comply and delay the violence. But Jerry is consumed by his own rage. He shoots her 5 times in the back and chest.
Once she is dead, the panic sets in and the calculated cover-up begins. Jerry flees down the mountain. He drives Barbara's car back toward Provo. On the way, he chucks the heavy .357 and her purse into a random body of water.
Wait, which means Richard Finder's psychic vision about the murder weapon being thrown into water was nothing more than an uncanny, horrifying coincidence.
Yes, a coincidence that nearly sent an innocent psychic to prison.
It is wild how an unrelated detail can derail an investigation for decades.
Absolutely wild.
So Jerry gets back to Provo. He deliberately parks Barbara's car down the street from her house at that unknown apartment complex, ensuring her 7 roommates won't see him getting out of the driver's seat.
Very calculated.
Highly calculated. And then he takes the literal goodbye note that Barbara had written that morning, the one about leaving to find her people, and he leaves it right on the front seat.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
He knows perfectly well that when the police find it, they will misinterpret it as a suicide note or assume she just ran away. It is a brilliant, evil misdirection.
And the misdirection worked flawlessly. He wasn't caught in 1974 because he played the part of the concerned best friend to absolute perfection.
It really did.
He organized their roommates, he went to the campus police, he filed the missing person report, and he was highly cooperative with Captain Hayward during interviews. He hid behind the guise of grief.
But a violent nature rarely stays hidden forever. About a year after he murdered Barbara, Jerry's violent streak emerged again. He was investigated and linked to a series of terrible campus rapes at BYU.
And that's how they got him.
Yep. That subsequent criminal history is ultimately how his DNA ended up in the national system, waiting silently for Detective Park to pull it from the dirt in 2007.
30 years later.
When police finally confronted Jerry with the DNA match, he was already dying of cancer. Faced with the undeniable science, he confessed to Barbara's murder in exchange for a reduced sentence. He served just 5 years in prison before dying in 2014.
The layers of tragedy in this case are immense. It forces you to re-examine where the true danger lies. Barbara was looking out for the stranger in the bushes, preparing for the Ted Bundys of the world, when the real threat was sitting right in her passenger seat.
So what does this all mean for you? When you absorb a story like this, what do you take away from it? Barbara bought a powerful weapon to protect herself from dangerous men, and her own best friend stole that weapon and used it against her.
I think there's a chilling concept here that we haven't fully examined yet, and it is the weaponization of our own words.
The note.
The note. Think about Barbara's intense isolation. If she hadn't felt profoundly alienated and judged by the strict rules of her environment, she never would have written that vague, desperate goodbye note to her roommates.
That's so true.
Jerry didn't have to forge a suicide note or invent a complex alibi from scratch. He simply repurposed Barbara's own desperate plea for freedom to buy himself 3 decades of evasion.
That is heavy.
It forces you to look at your own life and wonder, how often do our own attempts to escape a bad situation unwittingly hand the people who wish us harm the exact tools they need to cover their tracks?
That is an incredibly heavy, thought-provoking way to look at it. It really highlights how vulnerable we can become when we are just trying to find a place to belong. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this analysis stays with you. And as always, we encourage you to keep questioning the narratives around you and stay curious. See you next time.